My name is David Buckle and I'm a volunteer here at the Red Hook Community Farm in Brooklyn, New York. The farm has the largest compost program in the city that uses entirely sustainable resources, either solar power or human power. Today we're going to talk about rats. Cities have plenty of rats, but some people blame compost sites for the rats. The real question is whether or not there are more rats because of the compost, or whether the rats are already there, whether or not the compost is there. What we're going to show you now is an example of where the rats might be there because of the compost. So this box sat still in somebody's tiny urban backyard for a long time, and that's long enough for rats to figure out there's food to be had. It helps to put something like this 1/4-inch hardware cloth on the bottom to deter rats from burrowing under. But you can see that if there's something next to the box or it's near a wall, the rat might find a way in anyway. And even if it can't get in, the compost can create warmth that the rat might like as a habitat. And you'll find that the rat's burrowing underneath the bin even if they can't get in the bin for the food. So the thing about something like this is you either have to be moving it around a lot so the rats get discouraged from setting up a habitat, or you have to put it on a foundation like cement or some sand or gravel, something too inhospitable for the rat to set up a burrow. Or you have to get rid of the box. It's the same problem with the larger compost bins. Hardware cloth may bar a rat's access to food, but they might still set up home underneath unless you dig down and fill in with cement or sand or gravel. Deny access to food, deny access to habitat. So here's a slam dunk approach, the tumbler. Tumblers are off the ground, so there's no potential rat food or rat habitat, unless the humans loading the thing are sloppy, and that's another discussion about controlling humans rather than rats. Here's the thing about tumblers. A lot of users get frustrated because they were promised by the manufacturers they'd get finished compost sooner rather than later. The thing about tumblers is they're rodent-proof, and so that's what you have to pay attention to. They're sealed and they're up off the ground, and they don't have to be moved around the way the bins or the other systems have to be. The difference you're looking at with a bin or a box will be that you might have to put hardware cloth at the base in order to keep the rats from coming in. You might have to use a foundation of cement or sand or something like that to make sure there's no habitat underneath that's hospitable. You don't have to do this with a tumbler. So love the tumbler, hate the seller. Obviously, the acts of loading and unloading relate to denying access to food. It's important not to leave the bittiest bits of food on the ground. The same principle applies for those sites like this one, where the large scale requires the use of elongated compost mounds called windrows. These windrows are surrounded by bloom-swept surfaces, so there is no rat food. Then they are sealed with more mature compost to make it harder for rats to access food. And then they are turned quite often, so rats never get the slightest hint of a good habitat. And lastly, lots of open space is maintained around the windrows, which leads to the final point for controlling rats: denying access to security. Rats really hate crossing open spaces in order to get to where they want to go because it makes them more vulnerable to predators like cats or city hawks. So tumblers will do well if tucked into a space where rats have no escape if they are cornered. or do well if lots of space is all around for predator access. It's a new way of thinking, but community gardens might want to consider moving their compost bins to the center of the garden rather than back in some corner near walls, because that way the rats have to cover more open space, feel more vulnerable, less secure, discouraged, and maybe deterred from coming. Lastly, there's the issue of storage of compost materials like leaves or hay, which can really create very attractive habitats for rats. The answer is to seal the material up and keep it off the ground, or to keep moving it around like the windrows so the apartment-seeking rat looks somewhere else. Remember the question, are there more rats because of the compost, or are there the same number of rats whether or not the compost is there? If you lift up this tarp covering leaves or hay or compost and some rats run out, then the answer is that the compost is the problem because the composter created a habitat. On the screen, we'll put some links for you where you can find more written materials about the details of controlling rats. But the summary is this: deny access to food, deny access to habitat, and deny access to security. This is all so important because compost is not always easy to do, but it is so well worth doing to provide a better environment for our children in the future. If a rat is spotted near your site, you want the answer to the question to be, the rats are already there, we're in a city. They're not there because of the compost.